I never believed that a single moment could rearrange your entire life. I thought that was the kind of thing people said in movies, the kind of romantic nonsense that dissolves the second it touches real life. Then I saw her, and everything I thought I knew about myself, about my world, about what mattered, all of it shifted beneath my feet, like the ground had decided to become something new. This is my story. Every word of it is real. And if you have ever held love at arm's length because you were terrified of what it might cost you, then you already understand the weight of what I am about to share. Hit subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard. It was a Saturday evening in late October, and I was standing on the mezzanine level of the Whitmore Gallery in Manhattan. There was a charity art auction happening, one of those glittering events where wealthy people come to be seen giving, where generosity is performed beneath chandeliers and captured by photographers from society pages. I attended these things out of obligation. My name carried weight in certain circles, and absence was noticed more than presence. So I showed up. I shook hands. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, and I quietly counted the minutes until I could leave without it looking rude. I was doing exactly that, mentally calculating my escape, when I heard a voice cut through the noise of clinking glasses and hollow laughter. It was not loud. It was steady and deliberate, almost musical in its rhythm. Someone was speaking near the east wall about one of the paintings. It was a massive abstract piece in deep indigo and gold that I had walked past without a second glance. But this voice was describing it like it held the entire history of longing inside its brushstrokes. I turned, and there she was. She stood in front of that canvas with her hands slightly raised, gesturing as she spoke to a small group who hung on every word. Her skin was a rich, luminous umber, and the gallery lights seemed to soften around her, as though even the room understood she deserved a gentler glow. She wore a burgundy dress, simple and elegant, and her locks were gathered loosely at her shoulders. But it was not what she wore or how she looked that stopped me cold. It was the way she inhabited the space around her. She did not dominate it. She filled it. There is a difference. One demands attention. The other earns it without ever asking. I stood there watching her like a man who had forgotten how to move. My business partner Marcus appeared at my elbow with a fresh drink and followed my gaze. "That is Naomi Adeyemi," he said casually. "She curates the emerging artists program here. Brilliant woman. She has been turning this gallery into one of the most important cultural spaces in the city." He looked at me and grinned. "You want me to introduce you? Or are you just going to stand here staring like a museum visitor who forgot where the exit is?" I told him I was fine. I told him I was just admiring the art. He did not believe me for a second, and honestly, neither did I. Fate, however, has its own sense of timing. 20 minutes later, the gallery director pulled me into a conversation about a potential sponsorship for the next exhibition season. And before I could register what was happening, Naomi was standing beside us, being introduced as the creative mind behind the programming. She extended her hand, and when I took it, something shifted inside my chest. A lock, turning. A door, opening into a room I did not know existed. "Julian Hargrove," I said, and my voice sounded foreign to me, softer than I intended. "Naomi," she replied. Her eyes were dark brown, warm and direct, and they studied me with a kind of honest curiosity that made me feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "You looked like you were about to leave earlier. Did something change your mind?" I almost told her the truth right then, almost said, "Yes, you," but I caught myself and offered something safer, something polished and meaningless about the quality of the collection. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that told me she saw right through it, but was gracious enough not to say so. We talked for over an hour that night. She told me about growing up in Baltimore, about a mother who painted murals on the sides of buildings in neighborhoods the city had forgotten, about how art had saved her when nothing else could reach her. She spoke about beauty as though it were an act of resistance, as though creating something meaningful in a world designed to overlook you was the bravest thing a person could do. I had never heard anyone talk about their work with such ferocity and tenderness at the same time, and when she asked about mine, I found myself peeling back layers I usually kept sealed. I did not give her the rehearsed speech about innovation and disruption. I told her about the boy who used to build things in his garage, who dreamed of technology that could connect people across distances that felt impossible. I told her how somewhere along the way, That boy had gotten buried under quarterly earnings reports and investor expectations, and how some days I was not sure he was still in there at all. Naomi listened in a way that made me feel like every word mattered, not because of who I was, but because of what I was saying. When the evening ended, I asked if she would like to continue the conversation over dinner sometime. She studied me for a moment, and I felt my heart hammer against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "I would like that," she said, and she wrote her number on the back of a gallery brochure in handwriting that was small and precise. I drove home to my penthouse that night with every window down despite the October cold. I needed something physical to remind me I was awake. I replayed her words, her laugh, the way she tilted her head when she was considering an idea. I had not felt this alive in years, maybe ever, but as I stood alone in my apartment, staring at the skyline I had spent a fortune to look at every night, the familiar weight settled back onto my shoulders. I thought about my mother Victoria, who had spent my entire adult life curating a list of appropriate women for me to date. Women from established families, women whose last names opened the same doors ours did. I thought about my father, whose approval I had chased like a shadow I could never quite catch. I thought about the world I moved in, a world that smiled politely while enforcing its boundaries with surgical precision. And I felt the first tremor of a fear that would nearly destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. Our first real date was at a small Eritrean restaurant in Brooklyn that Naomi loved. The tablecloths were mismatched. The silverware was basic. Local artwork covered every inch of the walls. And the food was extraordinary. She ordered for both of us, and I watched her speak to the owner in a mix of English and warmth that made the woman beam. We ate with our hands, and Naomi laughed when I struggled with the injera. And I laughed too, and I realized it was the first genuine laugh I had produced in months. We talked until the restaurant closed around us. We kept seeing each other, coffee on Tuesday mornings before her gallery opened, late dinners at her apartment in Fort Greene where she would cook, and I would pretend to help while mostly just watching her move through her kitchen like it was a studio. Long walks through Prospect Park on Sunday afternoons when the world felt quieter and more honest, but always in the margins, always in the spaces where no one from my world would see us. I told myself it was about privacy, about protecting something fragile and new. But Naomi was perceptive in the way that people who have spent their lives reading between the lines tend to be. She noticed when I chose the corner table. She noticed when I hesitated before holding her hand on the street. She noticed when I silenced my phone during our evenings together, not out of devotion, but out of dread that someone from my other life might interrupt and force the two worlds to collide. She never accused me. She never made demands, but I could see the question forming in her eyes, sharpening with each hidden dinner, each declined invitation to a public event, each time I introduced her to no one. 4 months in, on a rainy Wednesday night, the question finally found its voice. We were sitting on the floor of her living room surrounded by sketches she had been working on for an upcoming exhibition. She set down her pencil and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was something worse. It was resignation. "Julian," she said quietly, "am I someone you are ashamed of?" The words hit me like a physical blow, like stepping off a curb you did not see. "No," I said immediately. "Naomi, absolutely not." "Then why have I not met anyone in your life? Why do we only exist in this apartment and in restaurants where no one knows your name?" I opened my mouth to explain, to offer the tangled mess of reasons and rationalizations I had been carrying, but she held up her hand. "I am a black woman, Julian. I have spent my entire life navigating spaces that were not designed for me. I know what it looks like when someone is afraid to be seen with me. I just never thought I would see it from someone who says he loves me." The silence between us felt like a canyon. I wanted to reach across it, but I did not know how. "It is not you I am afraid of," I whispered. "It is everything that comes after." "After what?" "After everyone finds out. My family, the board, the press, the people who smile at galas while making comments that sound polite but cut like glass." Naomi's eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She was too strong for that, too dignified. "So you love me in private and perform your life in public, and I am supposed to be grateful for the private part." "That is not what I meant, Julian." Her voice was firm now, steady as bedrock. I grew up watching my mother paint beautiful things on walls that the city kept threatening to demolish. She taught me that anything worth creating is worth defending. I will not be a beautiful secret that someone keeps behind closed doors because the world outside might not approve. She stood up and walked to the window. Her back was to me. I think you should go. Naomi, please. Please. Her voice cracked on that single word, and the sound of it broke something inside me that I did not know could break. Just go. I left, and the door closing behind me sounded like the end of everything. The weeks that followed were a descent into a grayness I had never experienced. I went to work, attended meetings, signed documents, spoke at a conference, and remembered none of it. My penthouse, which I had once thought of as a sanctuary, became a mausoleum. Every silence in it was a reminder of her voice. Every empty chair held the shape of her absence. Food had no taste. Sleep would not come. I moved through the world like a man whose insides had been scooped out and replaced with something cold and hollow. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. He had known me since we were teenagers, back when I was still the kid building things in a garage, before the money, before the name became a brand. He showed up at my door one Sunday morning with takeout and a refusal to leave. You look terrible, he said, setting the food on the counter I never used. Talk to me. So I told him everything. About Naomi, about the hiding, about the conversation that ended it all, about the look in her eyes that I could not stop seeing every time I closed mine. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he leaned forward and said something that cut straight through every defense I had built. Julian, you have spent 10 years building an empire because you wanted to prove you could shape the world, but you will not reshape your own life for a woman you love. Do you hear how absurd that sounds? It is more complicated than a business deal, I said. No, it is simpler. That is what scares you. You cannot hide behind spreadsheets and strategy here. You just have to be honest. And you have been lying, not to her, to yourself. He was right. He was devastatingly, uncomfortably right, and the recognition of it settled into my bones with a weight that felt permanent. The moment that changed everything arrived without warning, the way all pivotal moments do. 3 weeks after Naomi walked out of my life, I was invited to speak at the Global Innovation Summit, a televised event watched by millions, an annual stage where leaders in technology, business, and culture shared ideas meant to shape the future. I had a script. I had talking points about artificial intelligence and ethical design and the next frontier of human connectivity. I stood backstage with that script in hand and my heart drumming a rhythm I could not control. The stage manager gave me the 2-minute signal. I looked down at my prepared remarks. They were polished, safe, predictable. I folded them in half and put them in my pocket. When I walked onto that stage, 4,000 people in the audience and millions watching from their screens, I felt the terror rise like a tide. But beneath the terror, there was something else, a pulse of clarity so fierce it burned. I was supposed to talk to you tonight about the future of technology, I began. My voice echoed through the auditorium. But I need to talk about something more important. I need to talk about cowardice. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I am one of the most successful people in this room, at least by the metrics we have all agreed to measure success by: revenue, valuation, market influence. But I recently discovered that by the only metric that truly matters, the courage to love honestly and openly, I am a complete failure. The auditorium went silent. I could hear my own breathing amplified through the microphone. There is a woman, I continued, who changed my understanding of everything I thought I knew. Her name is Naomi Adeyemi. She is an artist, a curator, a force of nature who believes that beauty is an act of resistance. She is brilliant and compassionate and unflinching in her integrity. She is also a black woman. And I mention that not because it should matter, but because it is the reason I hid her, not from myself. I have known who she is from the moment I met her. I hid her from all of you, from my family, from my world, because I was terrified of what you would think, of what you would say, of what it might cost me. I paused. My hands trembled against the podium, and in doing so, I lost her, because she understood something I did not. That love you are afraid to speak aloud is not love at all. It is captivity dressed in good intentions. I looked directly into the central camera. The one I knew carried the live feed to screens around the world. Naomi, I do not know if you are watching this, but I need you to know, I am done being afraid. You taught me that the most courageous thing a person can do is stand in front of the world and say, this is who I love, and I am proud. I should have said it the first night I met you. I should have said it every single day since. I am saying it now, not because it is easy, but because you deserve someone willing to do the hard thing. You deserve someone who will fight for you in the daylight, not just hold you in the dark. I love you, and I am not afraid anymore. I stepped back from the podium without taking questions. I did not want to explain or defend what I had said. I had spoken the truth. That was enough. My phone started ringing before I reached the hallway. Family members, friends, business associates, board members who suddenly needed urgent conversations. My mother called 4 times. My father sent a single text that read, "We need to talk." The internet erupted with reactions. Some were beautiful, some were ugly, most were surprised. Headlines formed within minutes. I ignored all of it, because the only voice I wanted to hear was hers, and she was silent. That day passed, then the next. 2 full days of noise from the entire world, and silence from the only person whose opinion mattered. On the 3rd morning, I was sitting in my office, staring at a painting I had bought from the Whitmore Gallery the week after I met her. The indigo and gold abstract she had described with such love that first night. A quiet knock came at my door, and my assistant's voice, slightly breathless, came through the intercom. "Mr. Hargrove, there is a Naomi Adeyemi here to see you." My entire body went still. My heart stopped and then restarted with a force that made my chest ache. "Send her in." When Naomi walked through my office door, the room rearranged itself around her the way it always did. She wore a simple white blouse and dark jeans. Her locks fell freely past her shoulders, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. "You went on live television," she said, standing just inside the doorway. Her voice caught between disbelief and something warmer. "I did. In front of millions of people. Yes. You said my name. I will say it again. Right now. If you want, I will say it every day. I will say it to anyone who asks, and plenty of people who do not." She crossed her arms, but I could see the corner of her mouth fighting a smile. "Your mother called my gallery. Did you know that?" My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "She said she wanted to meet the woman her son was willing to burn down his reputation for." Naomi paused. She sounded terrified. "But she called." "That counts for something." I moved toward her slowly. "The way you approach something sacred, something you are not sure you deserve to touch. Naomi, I am so sorry for every hidden dinner, for every time I looked around a room before reaching for your hand, for making you feel like you were something to be concealed instead of celebrated. You were right. Love without courage is not love. It is just loneliness with company." She unfolded her arms, and her eyes shone with tears she finally allowed to fall. "You really are not afraid anymore." "I am terrified," I admitted. "But I am more afraid of living without you than I am of anything the world can throw at us." She stepped forward and placed her hands on my chest, right over my heart, as though checking to make sure it was still beating. "Then we do this together," she said. "No more shadows, no more corners. You walk into every room with me beside you, and you do not flinch. I will not flinch. Promise me." "I promise. On everything I am and everything I want to become." She kissed me then, and it felt like the first honest thing I had done in my entire life. That was 2 years ago. Naomi and I are still together, stronger than ever. We built something real on the wreckage of my fear, and it stands more solid than anything I have ever constructed in a boardroom. We faced everything we expected to face. Family tension that sometimes flared like old wounds reopening. Media scrutiny that dissected our relationship like it was public property. Social media cruelty from strangers who had opinions about a love they would never understand. Business associates who suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Some of my oldest friends stopped calling. Some of my family members still have not fully come around. But we also found things we never expected. We found allies in places we never thought to look. We found that courage is contagious. Other people started reaching out, sharing their own stories about love that defied expectations. We found that most people, when they actually spent time with Naomi, could not help but love her the way I do. My mother eventually came around. It took time, but Naomi's warmth and grace won her over the same way it won me. My father still struggles sometimes, but he is trying, and that is more than I ever expected. He told me quietly one evening after watching Naomi speak at a fundraiser about art education in underfunded schools that she reminded him of my grandmother. That same fire, he said. It was the closest thing to full approval he had ever given, and it meant the world. Naomi's family welcomed me with open arms, though her older brother made it very clear during our first meeting that he would be watching closely to make sure I treated his sister the way she deserved. I respected that. I would have done the same thing. We got engaged 6 months ago. The proposal was not planned. We were in her gallery after hours, sitting on the floor surrounded by canvases for a new exhibition. The paint on her fingers had smudged onto my shirt. The city hummed distantly through the tall windows, and I looked at her and felt a certainty so absolute it left no room for doubt. "Marry me," I said. She looked up, a streak of cerulean blue on her cheek. "Right now, on the floor of my gallery, with paint in my hair. Right now, on the floor of your gallery, with paint in your hair and everywhere else. Marry me, because you made me brave. Marry me, because you taught me that the only thing worth building is a life you do not have to hide." She said yes, and then she cried, and I cried, and we sat there among the paintings she had chosen to champion, art from voices the world had tried to ignore, and I understood for the first time that love does not ask you to be smaller. It demands that you become the fullest and most courageous version of yourself. The wedding is in the spring. It will be full of color because Naomi insists on it, full of music and food and people who love us, not despite who we are together, but because of it. Some chairs will be empty. Some invitations went unanswered. That is the cost, and we have made peace with it. If my story leaves you with anything, let it be this. The love that asks you to hide is not love worth keeping. The love that terrifies you, the love that makes you want to stand on the highest stage you can find and say someone's name until your voice gives out, that is the love worth every risk, every loss, every moment of fear you will have to walk through to reach it. Naomi taught me that real courage has nothing to do with boardrooms or balance sheets. Real courage is choosing every single day to love someone so openly that the world has no choice but to make room. And if the world will not make room, you build a door. You build it together, and you walk through it, holding hands, refusing to let go. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Love should never be hidden. Subscribe for more real stories about courage, love, and the moments that change everything. What would you risk for true love? Let me know in the comments below, because the only love worth having is the love worth fighting for.